Greetings sailors and welcome to my preview of the USS Texas, which of course is one of the new premium ships that's hit the shop in, this month, May. Now, apologies first off if you can hear a bit of wind noise in the background. It's actually quite breezy today, but there's nothing I can do about that, sadly. And also, apologies in advance for the massive derp that you will see later on in this video, because the point of the Texas is it's a New York, but with really good anti-aircraft capability. It's basically a fully upgraded New York, but with almost Cleveland levels of anti-aircraft. So, it sounds good, right? Well, it's a bit of a gimmick. Now, the massive derp, I'll give you a little idea of what it's going to be. Basically, I played a bunch of games in this, had some good games, but neither of the games I'm going to show you are ones where I actually get to show off the anti-aircraft capability. So, yeah, but the particularly massive derp in the second replay it's spectacular, even for me. I have no idea what Captain's Guy is going to say about it, but I wait with, trepidation. So we're starting off with this game, which was a reasonably short action-filled game, and it's going to be a bit unfortunate, actually, for a couple of the enemy team, because it's going to be some prime battleship RNG in action. Now, of course, those of you that have played battleships will know that American battleships especially, they're not the most accurate guns. I was actually looking at the stats in comparison to the Congo. This gets a lot of guns, but they're not super accurate guns. They're not particularly long-range guns either. So this is the first of my victims. We're just going to go with victims, yes. St. Louis, who I just delete with one salvo. I mean, it can happen, but I felt a bit bad about it because, here's this guy and he's puttering along in his brand new Tier 3 cruiser and he's really enjoying himself, and then suddenly this tremendous troll comes along in his battleship and just deletes him with one salvo. Of course, it's beyond my control. I can try and hit the enemy ships, but I can't aim to one-shot a ship like that. That is pure RNG when that happens. So, broadside Tenryu, I mean, this is again, Tier 3 cruiser, but this is a fairly tempting target. And it can't possibly happen again, right? Yeah, okay. Now, the rest of the game's not going to be that spectacular, but still, that's 2 cruiser deletions for over 40,000 damage. And that doesn't happen every day. So let's talk about the stats. There's obviously 2 things we can compare this to. There's the New York itself and the Congo. And I should say, the New York class was only 2 battleships. The USS New York itself, which is hence using the New York port for those kind of beauty shots at the start, and the Texas. And this is, as I've said, basically a fully upgraded New York. So a lot of the stats are very similar. Now, with the recent patch, we've actually had a couple of things, a couple of new items of information that pop up in the port. So there's a couple of things that we can see, like shell velocity, for instance, or it also gives a new stat of torpedo protection and flood protection. And I'm guessing torpedo protection relates to your bulges, or maybe the chance to negate flooding happening, or well, actually no, I suppose that would be flood protection. It doesn't exactly explain what they are. It gives 2 percentages, but it's hard to know exactly what they relate to, only that I guess it gives you some idea of survivability. Anyway, we'll start off from the top. I mean, in terms of hit points, it's identical to the New York's fully upgraded hull, 49,100, which is behind the Congo at 54,000. It gives torpedo protection at 31% and flood protection at 77%, both of which are better than the Congo. And in fact, the torpedo protection is 1% better than the New York. So there you go, you've got 1% better, like bulge armor or something. It's probably not going to make a difference, but anyway. Unsurprisingly, of course, the guns are exactly the same in caliber. You've got 5 twin turrets with 14-inch guns, and although there is the possibility of the firing arcs being somewhat different, it basically handles much like the New York. Now, I have this secondhand from watching iChase Gaming's video, and I can't check it myself firsthand because I don't have a New York anymore. I don't have the credit to buy a New York just to check the turret firing arcs. It's the kind of thing that it's very, very hard to have exact numbers for. So there's a possibility that the firing arcs are a bit different. And if you actually look at the models, the mid-deck area, there's a lot more stuff on the Texas than there is on the New York. So it's possible that that restricts the range, or it gives a different kind of range for that mid-deck turret. And I think it is that mid-deck turret. I'm not sure, the amidships one. Rate of fire, again, identical, 1.8 rounds a minute, so it's about 36-second reloads. Your turret turn time is flat on 60 seconds, although you can get that down to expert marksman, with expert marksman, to just over 48.5 seconds. Again, identical to the New York. The base range, 15.6 kilometers. Dispersion, 216 meters at max range, so again, identical to the New York. And you can, of course, mount the artillery plotting room, the gun upgrade, because it's got 3 upgrade slots like the rest of the tier 5 battleships, which will put your range out, again like the New York, to 18.1 kilometers. But maybe you won't want to do that, and I will get to why very shortly, because we're going to then talk about anti-aircraft ratings, because that is what makes this unique. That is the flavour of this thing, that it has that incredibly good AA rating. Shell damage, again, 10,300 for AP and 5,000 for HE, so that's roughly AP-wise the same as the Congo, although the Congo actually does with HE Citadels have almost 6,000 damage, but the Texas and the New York both have a better fire chance with their HE shells. So if you encounter an angled, or I don't know, Colorado or something, it's probably worth switching to the HE shells instead. Now we come to secondaries and the AA rating, and this is where the huge major divergence between the Texas and the New York happens. This thing has got incredible AA, but it's very short-ranged AA. The ranges are actually exactly the same as the New York. You've got some 20mm guns, which go out to 2 kilometers, and then you've got some 40mm and 76mm guns, which go out to 3.5 kilometers. So, like the New York, it's a pretty small envelope. It doesn't cover a lot of airspace. Where the major difference is, however, is the amount of DPS, or the amount of guns you've got and the amount of DPS those guns produce. So, something like 40% is from those very short-range 20mm guns, and the rest of it's made up with the 76mm and the 40mm. The base DPS is just over 300, which is crazy good, especially on a tier 5 battleship. But that's really limited by the range of those guns. So, what you almost need is, because this is obviously a premium ship, you can do this, you almost need to put your Cleveland captain or your American AA cruiser captain in this thing to get the benefit of having BFT to some extent, but more importantly AFT. You won't get the benefit of the I can't remember what it's called now, but the new anti-aircraft gunnery skill, which puts your like manually selecting gives better like damage for the selected target. There's probably a more elegant way of putting that, because that is limited to, I think, AA guns over a caliber of 85mm. You don't have any. So that is completely ineffective. But AFT in particular, you will want, because that's an extra 20% to your AA envelope. And, of course, you can also, instead of the artillery plotting room, you can mount a bit of equipment that gives you another extra 20%. Now, the way that Warships works, and this is the derpy game, by the way, this is prepare to facepalm so hard. The way that the stats work in this game is it's not 20% and then calculated another 20% on top of that. It's basically additive, so it's 40% overall. So you can extend your range between the equipment and the AFT captain skill by 40% overall. That then brings your envelope out to 2.8 kilometers for the 20mm guns, which is, like I said, about 40% of your AA capability overall. And then the rest you can take to just under 5 kilometers, 4.9 clicks. So that's a much better envelope. That is actually the point where it starts to become really effective at shooting down enemy planes. But you've got to make a big sacrifice to do that, because without the artillery plotting room, you've got a pretty short main battery range. And if you have a game like I just had, I mean, it didn't matter so much with that map because I was top tier and it wasn't a huge map. I didn't have to go far to find enemies. But for a bigger map, and especially in a bottom tier situation, doubly especially if there's no carriers in play, in which case your extra AA capability doesn't matter one bit. Suddenly you're in the kind of situation that you're in when you're playing the Warspite, where if you're very bottom tier, in a tier 7 game, you're going to be massively outmatched range-wise. It's going to be really very risky getting close enough to the enemy. So that alone makes me kind of iffy on this ship, because it's got that one gimmick of the AA, and it's incredibly good AA. But you've got to make such a big sacrifice to really make it work, because if you have the artillery plotting room and you have the smaller envelope, your AA does not really engage planes close enough to your ship to actually make a difference to save you. Otherwise, if you're going to do that, then you might as well just be playing the regular New York. Now, obviously, you can drop any captain into this, and obviously it's premium, so it's going to make more credits, but it just, I don't know. It seems like you kind of have to go for the AA spec on this for there to be, for it to have any kind of differentiation over the New York, for there to be any real point in playing up to its strengths, because that's its only real strength over the New York, is that extra AA capability. Now, have you noticed the derp yet, by the way? In this game, where there are 2 enemy carriers, now one's a tier 4 and one's a tier 6, this should be a prime opportunity to show off this amazing AA. But for some reason, and I could not tell you why, I have it turned off. Now, it was turned off from the very start of the battle, which means I turned it off in the previous battle and the game had remembered my setting. Maybe I accidentally hit the key on the keyboard and I didn't notice, because I went through this battle cursing my anti-aircraft gunners, because I get, at various points, and you will see, the enemy carriers giving me their attention. And I was control clicking on the plane groups and going, why aren't I shooting down any planes? And for some reason, I just did not notice. And that is an incredibly huge derp, even by my standards. So I don't know. I mean, this entire review, the entire point of this ship is the incredibly good AA rating. And I don't have a replay to show you where I get to show off those AA guns. I mean, that's just a pure distilled essence of PointyHairedJedi right there, isn't it? That's special, even for me. I mean, otherwise, this was a really good game. I actually got a Kraken Unleashed in this game, which, spoiler alert, but I don't get a lot of those medals. I've only got like 3 or 4 of those. And it was a really fun game, apart from the fact that I couldn't understand why my AA wasn't working. And for some reason, I just had developed this little blind spot and didn't notice that it was actually telling me that my anti-aircraft guns were turned off. So, well done me. Well done me. Anyway, we'll quickly jog through the rest of the stats, and then I can chat about the rest of this game. Speed-wise, you are actually half a knot slower than the New York. It's 20.5 knots. Turn radius is the same, but the rudder shift time is actually marginally worse at 14 seconds versus 12.5. So it doesn't turn. It doesn't respond quite as well. And one of the hallmarks of the American battleships is actually their turn radius. So it suffers a little bit there in comparison to the New York. Well, actually, no, having said, yeah, it is the turn radius. It's got the turn radius. It's the responsiveness, rather, of being able to turn to avoid torpedoes or whatever. It's slightly more sluggish in that regard. Probably not enough to make a huge difference, but there are times when you might feel that the New York would just respond to your commands just that little bit quicker. And lastly, we come to camo, and the effective camo of this thing, well, because it's a premium ship, it comes with free camo, is 15.5 kilometers. Now, the actual base camo without the paint on is 16, exactly the same as the New York, but there is literally no reason why you wouldn't use the free camouflage paint, basically. So the effective base camo is 15.5. You can, with a fully decked out everything, get, let's see, with the captain skill, you can get it down to 13.3, same as the New York, which is, you know, if you had a 5-point captain and you had the camo skill, 13.3 kilometers is actually relatively stealthy. You could sneak up on people and just, you know, at that kind of range, it's like 13 kilometers away, suddenly a battleship appears and it's like, oh, hello. That would give somebody a nasty surprise. And very lastly, the air detection range is 10.7 kilometers. So it is basically a New York with better AA. And I mean, the major differences with the Congo, you're probably already aware of the difference between the New York and the Congo. It's in the number of guns, the range of the guns, and really the accuracy as well, because the Congo has one less turret. It's got 4x2. It's actually got a slightly better rate of fire. It's got a much better range. It's got 21.2 kilometers. But the dispersion, the max dispersion at that range is 235 meters. Compared to the 216 meters at 15.6 kilometers range, well, you can tell that overall the Congo just has the more accurate guns, even though you don't have an exact metric for comparing the two. So, yeah, also, obviously, it's got the speed as well. And a lot of people prefer the Congo for that reason. So, much like the New York, I mean, this is a fairly kind of sturdy, brawly kind of ship. But I would say, if you do have that AA spec, which you kind of need, and here we go, hooray, planes! Why aren't my anti-aircraft guns working? Oh, yeah, Jedi, you fool. Yeah, it will struggle. It will struggle without the gun range. So some people might decide, okay, I'm going to have the artillery plot room, I'm going to have the extra firepower range, but in which case your anti-aircraft capability is kind of wasted, because you're only going to get the full amount of DACA when the enemy planes are basically over your ship already and already making the drop. And you will still be whittling away the enemy aircraft squadrons. I mean, on the games where I did remember to have anti-aircraft turned on, I found that the AA was simply devastating against Tier 4 planes, absolutely shreds them. Against Tier 5 planes, you can still do a nasty number on them. You're not going to maybe shoot down whole squadrons in the same at the same pace that you would with Tier 4 aircraft squadrons, but it's still pretty nasty. And in terms of Tier 6 and Tier 7 aircraft squadrons, well, you're still going to do some damage, but it's not going to protect you completely. But still, if you shoot down, say, half of an enemy... what's the Tier 7 Japanese carrier? I can't remember now. Is it the Hiryu? No idea. I'm probably wrong in that. But anyway, if you shoot down, say, half their planes as they're coming in to try and make a drop, that's still half the torpedoes in the water, for instance. So it's not nothing. So anyway, despite my massive derp with this particular game, it was otherwise not bad. I mean, I'm going to take out this enemy carrier fairly shortly, this enemy Hosho. I managed to sneak down this flank fairly effectively, actually. This was a bit of a risky move on my part, because the speed of the New York means if... well, yeah, it's New York, really. The speed of this ship means that if you commit to this kind of flanking maneuver, as it, I suppose, could be called, if it goes wrong, you're kind of stuck. You can't rapidly withdraw. So it worked out for me. And I did have a couple of other allies that came down this way. Not ones that I could save, unfortunately, but still, I've been able to do rather well out of it myself. So there's the Hosho down, that's kill number 4. And the enemy team's basically done at this stage. I mean, our team in the west did very well. They held their ground, pushed back the enemy, and actually destroyed a bunch. I've killed a lot of enemy ships on this side. Not all of them. I think there were 1 or 2 kills by my teammates as well. But generally speaking, I've done pretty well for myself, except now the Independence is sending his planes after me. I can't shoot at him because A, I don't have the range, and no, actually mostly I just don't have the range. I was thinking he was behind the island, but I'm doing this in the little preview window because I've got my spreadsheet with all the stats open on the second window. But yeah, if I'd had if I'd had my anti-aircraft turned on, things would have gone a bit better for me. Just a little bit. I'm not quite paying enough attention to the fact that there were aircraft squadrons coming overhead at all either. But even if I hadn't been, I could have shot down some planes. This guy was probably sending his planes over and thinking, oh, this is really easy. I'm not losing any planes at all. Oh, I just can't. I can't get over it. Like, sometimes I derp and it's like, okay, I can understand I was distracted or I was talking about something else to somebody at the time or just something happened. But in this case, I have no explanation. I have no reason why I derped quite this hard. It's just quite amazing. I begin to understand how Caption Guy feels sometimes. Just a little bit. But shh, don't tell him I said that. Anyway, so I'm perilously low on health now. This enemy Congo, ARP Congo, is getting pretty close. I mean, the rest of the team is now pushing down as well. I mean, he's getting focused by other ships as well, but still, that carrier just keeps coming for me. He wants the kill. He wants a final kill, basically. He wants some final damage, and who can blame him for that? I've got no one to blame but myself, basically. Now, the Congo is being very unobliging. He's not giving me a broadside to shoot at all. There's also Nicholas closing in on him, although he's made his drop rather far away, I think. The carrier is now also coming under fire. However, that's not going to stop him dispatching planes in my direction. And I don't have a lot of health left at this stage, so here's more incoming dive bombers. And as my repair party is still on cooldown, actually this is rather dangerous. Oh, and I take a big hit from the Congo. He actually knocks out a turret entirely. Well, in which case these dive bombers are quite possibly going to kill me. Now, the Nicholas's torpedoes are at least forcing that Congo to turn, but yeah, it's not looking good. I'm now just desperately struggling to get my turret around in time. And there we go. I take the hit, double fire. I'm going to burn out, but I get the shots out, and there we go. Kraken unleashed, and it's just a flesh wound. So that was a nice dramatic ending there. It didn't have to be. All I had to do was look down at my keyboard and press the P key. This would have been a different game, and I would have been able to show off the anti-aircraft. You'll just have to believe me when I say it's really good. I mean, 332 with BFT is an incredible amount of DPS. That's amazing. That's better than some of the... You go to tier 8 and sort of 9 cruisers on, say... Oh, I can't even remember offhand, but, you know, like the Germans or the Japanese, they don't get AA ratings that good. At least going from memory even. I could be wrong about that. But still, it's just... I can't believe it. This was such a perfect game to showcase the AA. Such a perfect game. And instead, this. So there we go. They killed the carrier and that's it. We've actually won that game. So apart from the huge derp, that was actually a really nice game. Damage-wise, XP-wise, I mean, I was well at the top of the team, and in fact, having said it was a tier 6 game, we didn't really have many tier 6s, did we? It was like the tier 6 carriers, so technically it was a tier 6 game, but again, it was actually really good matchmaking. 80k damage, not bad. Actually, I think it was worse than the last game damage-wise, but that Kraken Unleashed was quite satisfying. And apart from, I keep saying this, but I just can't get over the magnitude of it, apart from the massive derp, it was pretty decent. So yeah, overall, the Texas, I mean, it's probably not going to be very expensive. If you liked the New York particularly, basically it plays like that, with shorter range guns but better AA, if you spec it that way. Or you can spec it out like the New York. You can have the artillery plotting room upgrade, get that 18-kilometer range. In which case even your AA rating, it's still fairly formidable, but it's not going to be nearly as useful. So, you know, bear that in mind. It really does come down to how you want to play this thing. In terms of how it does bottom tier, though, it's definitely going to suffer a lot more if you go for the AA spec than if you go for the artillery plotting room spec to get the extra range. So, again, that's the thing to bear in mind. Personally, I'm not sure I'd buy this thing. I found the New York perfectly pleasant ship to grind through, but to have a premium that plays just like the New York. I mean, I still play the Arkansas Beta sometimes, but that's because it gets it gets 6 equipment slots. This has just got 3, like a regular tier 5 battleship. So, personally, I'm not sure I'd rush out and buy one of these, but it's not a bad ship. It's not a bad ship at all. So, if you found this useful and informative, you can hit the like button. You can leave any comments below. You can sub to my channel if you want already. And, as always, stay tuned for more.